Welcome back to Wedlocked and Loaded.
Wedlocked and Loaded.
You women.
Do not lump us all in one category.
So you girls, and lie and stretch the truth and try
girls,
to get us jammed up.
First of all, I'm a whole ass woman, right? Think about
no
that.
No disrespect.
Sounds like it to me. So why can't y'all, what is it with men that they just can't walk away?
Depends how good it is. You don't want to give that away.
Wolf, well, an attorney for Sean Combs blasting federal agents who were at both residences yesterday in Miami and here in Los Angeles, blasting what they're calling a show of force by armed tactical agents. The attorney describing this as a witch hunt, saying that this was a gross overuse of military level force. Still, he says that Combs is cooperating with investigators. I'll read you part of the statement. He goes on to say neither Mr. Combs nor any of his family members have been arrested, nor has their ability to travel been restricted in any way. There has been no finding of criminal or civil liability with any of these allegations. Mr. Combs is innocent and will continue to fight every single day to clear his name. Of course, Wolf, the law enforcement action that attorney is criticizing involved dozens of federal agents showing up yesterday at these residences. This team of federal agents, Wolf, responsible for investigating very serious federal crimes.
Good evening, everyone. Wedlocked and Loaded here. We want to thank everyone for tuning in for this special conversation surrounding the allegations towards Sean P. Diddy Combs, Brother Love, Puff Daddy, however we know him. Some of this conversation may be triggering to certain audience members, so we are mindful of that. Please, practice your self-care. If you need to step away, turn the volume down, please do so. We are not coming from this conversation as legal analysts or, mental health counselors. However, we do want to have a conversation as a community. And we hope with this communal conversation regarding our community, good, bad, or indifferent, we can at least just provoke some different ways of thinking. And so, the powers that be got together. So we got the brothers from Sparring Minds. We got Queen Coach La in the building, and we just want to get into it. And for everyone that is watching that feels compelled to, chime in, ask a question, please ask a question, please chime in, whatever your thoughts are, raw and uncut, because this is what type of conversation this is. We're not on broadcast TV. We're not held by the same standards as Marv or Hot Sauce, where you can't swear. If we want to throw in
whatever we want,
right? So, but with that being said, I just want to put it out there. We do have a lot of talking points and agenda items that we want to get to. So, depending on the question and how it's and when it's given, it may not kind of get highlighted because we want to just kind of stay on track a little bit. So respectfully, I just want to say that. So with that being said, and shout out to my boss, Leah, the manager, as she's called. So ladies and gentlemen, we live.
Woo, we got a lot to talk about, y'all.
Yeah.
Hot topic, hot seat
yo,
topic.
Yo.
So first, do we want to because I think there's a lot of allegations that are circling around and it's been muddled with just opinions, right? And so I guess what the most common allegations are, do we want to run through what those are? Do you have them still?
Yes.
We can kind of just at least frame that. And again, we are not coming from a legal analyst perspective, right? We're not lawyers, we're not attorneys. So this is just at least what has been put out, and it has been consistent, I guess I'll say.
Yeah. I think one of the ones that we know for certain is the sex trafficking. So the allegations that he's facing are is sex trafficking, sexual abuse, and rape. Right. So those are the top three. Those are the top three.
And so, a lot of this was obviously spearheaded, right? Spearheaded.
Mm-hmm.
So from the Cassie settlement, I guess, right? And how fast in which that, I mean, that might have been one of the fastest turnarounds that I feel like I've ever seen, which in a court of public opinion, it's like, he's definitely guilty, right? So that started that whole thing. But then it also started what unfortunately happens when lawsuits come out and people settle, right? It becomes an opportunity. It becomes the community Powerball. So then you have that piece, but then you have the piece of people who know survivors, and victims and survivors, where it takes so much for them to actually come forward. You know what I mean? Like it's not so much about the money grab, right? So it's all these things surrounding someone who we grew up on and loved, right? And love. So
I think just to take it
So
back.
let's take a second. Let's take a quick second there.
Oh, okay.
Just a quick
Sorry.
second here. So we can be a little bit more specific in this area. So obviously the Cassie part, you brought that up, and that's important because that kind of started the journey, at least from the legal side of the conversation, right? But then we have Rod Jones, and Rod Jones has a laundry list of accusations that has in his documentation, right? A lot of that being tied to unwarranted sexual advances and being forced to sleep with people that he didn't want to sleep with. So we have the Rod Jones stuff that's happening. You make a great point that in a lot of these type of cases, what comes to mind is Bill Cosby. We start to see additional cases come to light, right? For people who feel wronged by that same individual. And because someone kicked the door in, they now feel the energy to share their own stories. So we had Jolie Dickerson Neal, who alleged that Diddy drugged her and had his way with her sexually back in 91. And so now she's coming forward as well. Now I believe that was in November, where we was coming forward with that kind of stuff, right? So now we're adding that to the pot. And then there's 3 other women who are saying something similar. So there is some additional things that, the accusations are starting to build.
And I also
we'll talk about that.
So I think that they were building. They had been building. I think Cassie. I think what it was with Cassie, it was her name, right, that got it out there. But I think she was able to put her claim out there and get some notoriety behind that because of the ASA, the Adult Survivors Act, right? And so that's where all of this is coming from.
And there was the statute of limitation too. So she had a timetable on when she had to put that information out, or she wouldn't have been able to.
Absolutely.
So I think, one of the reasons why I think Sean Combs and his team is saying it's a money grab, because there's like everybody's trying to catch that statute of limitation before they keep filing any charges towards him. So, that definitely is a factor to consider in all of this.
Yes.
The timing of it. But if you've ever been in a car accident or anything else, if you were in pain, your attorney starts saying, listen, what you gonna do? Because in a minute you can't do anything.
Exactly. I mean, and unfortunately, with any type of trauma, like you mentioned the car accident, right? Like with any type of trauma, sometimes the trauma is so bad that you black out things, right? You don't even realize that you've experienced things that you've actually experienced, right? And so for some of these survivors, they might not even realize that they went through what they went through until they had something that made them recall it, whether they saw something, smelled something, felt something, right? Like,
but it's also
an interesting thing
of letting everybody know your business. And I think
business.
The Black community is, even if it is true, do you want everybody else to know this truth or your truth? And what does that come with if I do disclose this? And that's a big factor, I think, in a lot of survivors wanting to either go public or file charges. Sometimes they really want to get behind it and they want it to be a thing of the past. Yeah. Once it's out here, now every time you look around, it's on the news, people are talking about it. So you're getting re-traumatized. That's a big choice to decide whether or not your story, you want it to be out there for people to be able to restate it, reshare it. Like, it's a big decision. I don't think people realize that piece in it. I know we talk about the money grab, but regardless, Cassie's forever going to be known now for this case.
Right.
Yeah.
What she reported that she went through. And is the money really worth it? Clearly, this is bigger than money. I feel like it's bigger than money.
Right.
No, we don't want to think of him in a negative light, but we also don't know if he's done any of these things. There's still allegations.
Yeah, and that's what
allegations.
I was. Sorry, Daniel, go ahead.
No, who's that?
Yeah, that was me. I think that's where I was gonna go with this is. So you mentioned that Cassie is now forever going to be remembered for this, and while that is true, so is Diddy, right? So this is a part of that story where there was no admission of guilt in that settlement.
No.
He just paid her to get this shit over with, right? But now our community will always relate to him as, nah, he just paid her off because he didn't want to face.
Or now it's no Diddy, right?
Let's correct that though. But let's correct that though. He didn't pay her. His insurance companies paid her.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want her to go after even more, for one, and they don't want that negative publicity.
Well, what she actually named the companies in the lawsuit, which then was smart and it was tactical, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that was a great point that you just brought up, because a lot of people don't even realize that's what happened, right? So it's no different if you get into a car accident and the insurance company is figuring out loss mitigations. So that's part of the story, but no one cares about that stuff because it's just, the timing either way, 24 hours. I'm assuming all of us have maybe gotten into a car accident, whether we were at fault or hit, right? And it's definitely not 24 hours. There's physical therapy involved. There's months and months and months and all that. So
you're building your case.
But I think you got to also know that there's behind the scenes stuff that's happening where your attorneys are being notified that this is occurring. So although we feel like it happened in 24 hours, believe me, there was a whole bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes that occurred. That might have been the last pieces that we're going to put it out there publicly if you don't pay, which might have been a threat. And then they actually went forward with it. So it got quickly, okay. But it was kind of too late at that point, because I'm sure he could have done that without us ever finding out if he would have paid soon.
Before.
And it's funny that we use the car accident and the lawyer metaphor, right? Because what happens with a lot of these lawsuits is, like, if you're in a car accident and you tell the lawyer, "Oh, my back hurts," and then they're like, "Oh, but doesn't that affect your neck too?" Some of them, like the ambulance chaser lawyers, right? That affected your neck too. Oh, don't you get headaches now too? Are you seeing double now? How many fingers am I holding up? And now it goes from one allegation to like 20.
Right.
Wow.
Oh, matter of fact, why don't you go see a therapist and let's say how this was pain and suffering and that you got PTSD,
Very fair point. Fair point. So, La, did you want to bring, because I know Little Rod was mentioned, which, that name in itself is just kind of wild. But did you want to?
Hey, yo, come on, man. Come on.
Leave him alone, man.
Hey, man.
Everybody had little before their name back in the day.
Yeah, but you don't put those two together. No man. Never mind. So if you want to pull up, that's
a whole other story.
I digress.
We going to Wolf?
Yeah. Oh no. Let's go to Mano.
Okay. All right.
Mano.
Making these accusations. You got some dude named Lil Rod. First of all,
that producer
should be a pause on his name. Like nigga named Little Rod. Like what? That's pause.
Do you think it's like a agenda to destroy popular?
This is what I'm saying. And if you know anything about, the 60s, and I hate to get all like this, but if you know anything about the 60s and what they did with black leadership and all that, these were some of the tactics, right? To destroy you. Basically, they divide and conquer,
like
right?
J. Edgar Hoover.
There you go, right? So COINTELPRO, what they would do was they would put out misinformation, have us looking at each other, right? They sending out letters and sending out things saying, this one talking about that one, this one got caught doing this, right? And it keeps us disorganized, right? And also propaganda, which is fueled through the media, is a tool that's always been used.
Media controls the mind.
This is what I'm saying. So I'm not quick to jump at what everybody else is running towards. Like, because if you ask the average person, she's like, what you think he did? He's like, I don't know, he did something. I don't know. Like, he, you know what I mean? He was sex trafficking. Oh, all right, what's sex? Like, they got to give me a clear definition of what sex trafficking is. So you saying he was what? He was making people sell their body? Like, I don't understand. Is it underage? Like, it's not clear to me. Mm-hmm. So I'm not jumping in that.
Well, I think he's making some valid points personally.
Great points. Definitely making some great points.
I think it can be a witch hunt. I think a lot of this is societal influence. And it's too much right now, social media influence on what people think versus being able to step away and sort of say, we don't really know Sean Combs, right? We know P. Diddy, we know his entertainment side and what he's allowed us to see. So who are we to make the decision that he did or didn't do anything? Like, check your facts, slow down for a minute, as they now are saying, let's pause. So I think he made a lot of valid points.
Let me jump in really quickly, if you guys don't mind, if you'll regale me for a second. So first of three things. First, we need to pass the ties plate around for Mano, right? Because I had never been so moved by somebody preaching in my life, right? That's first. The second thing is, he's speaking about the 60s. This is absolute facts. I'm a student of this time period. And what we saw last week, firestorm that we saw last week of the feds raiding 2 of Diddy's homes, right? And then the aftermath is that he's not charged. Nothing's happened, right? This is what they did to Fred Hampton, right? This is what they did to our Black civil rights leaders. They just stormed up in people's cribs and then they say, oh, we thought. Hey, man, get the fuck out of here, man. That can't be this is the Fed's MO. And that's what Mano was speaking to. Any other time in the history of life, when the Feds storm up into your crib they had assault rifles. Mm-hmm. That's drug dealer movements. You know what I'm saying? That's El Chapo, right? You go see them for stuff like that. Not a producer who you don't know what's going on, right? You might have thought that. That can't be the way. The third piece about this is listening to, this is going to tie into vendettas and individuals who, like Mano was speaking about, this is why I bring it up now. They put the community against each other. And it seemingly only works in our community, but I'll digress for now. So now we have people like Gene Deal, right? Former bodyguard or whatever he was to Puff, right? Yeah. And he's been running his mouth for years, talking about this. Every chance he gets a camera in front of him, Diddy's a villain, and here's why, right? So we have that. And then we have Albie Shore, right? Who is doing his things, right? Hey, man, shut the fuck up sometimes. You know what I mean? Leave your personal agendas to the side, especially when we don't have a man in cuffs. We don't have a man who hasn't been arrested for this. We don't have any of that. Nope. Come on, man.
But we do have a man that has raised your kid for about 30 years. Let's not forget about. I mean, and you put your comment to your child on Instagram.
Instead of just calling him.
Text him.
Yeah, instead of just calling him.
Because I don't know if he has his phone number. But I digress now, right? Seeing Chuck just mentioned the way the feds stormed his house. La, do you want to play the wolf real quick?
Let's see if it's gonna let me play. It seems like my computer is freezing with all these videos.
Oh no, La!
Listen, listen. We having too good of a conversation. Here comes the technical stuff. Damn. That last video jacked it up. It's like I'm still talking, but nothing is like letting me click.
They don't want us to be great.
I've had that happen before.
Like we're still live. I'm scared to touch anything.
Yeah. All right.
And part of me for bringing it up, I know, but Mano touched on it, and I didn't want to go out of the segment there, but it really, when you raid someone's house just to build a case, that's a different type of situation.
That means you have nothing though, and you're looking for something.
Right, you're still searching. You're still searching for something, and I think there's some things that was put out there, and it's not above the law to do so, where they're either planting, and I'm not saying that they did this in this particular case, or they're scrubbing, right?
Mhm.
And in this particular case, I feel like they were scrubbing, because there's somebody that could possibly have been on these tapes, right? That is higher,
Sure.
you know, that is a little bit more powerful than Puff, right? They got a little bit more power, that don't want their shit out there.
Sure.
So
But I think that that's a good point, is that this could also be that information that Puffy has is allowing him one power to blackmail other people. And he might have said, listen, I need that tape. Puff might have been like, nah, okay, let me tell you how I'm gonna get the tapes.
Yeah.
A lot of this is like chess. You know, if you've ever
Yeah.
read that book, 48 Laws of Power, a
Yeah.
lot of this that's going on, you know, again, could be a witch hunt, or it could be a way to also keep Puffy under some control too. Who knows who he may have rubbed the wrong way, who wants to show, or how do they say that? Flex
Right.
their power to let him see. You see, you think you can't be touched. Let me show you real quick.
Let me show you out.
But
And
so-
a lot of people are saying it stemmed from
the Diageo.
the Diageo lawsuit.
So before La, you definitely is still frozen, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
You
All right.
can't-
So
you can't play it from this end.
I don't know. Will it let you delete it off and put it back?
let me see.
We can see that.
Let me
But
see. So in the interim, but so as a community, and we might be bouncing around a little bit, at least me with this. When it comes to something like that, right? How do we, like, what do we do, right? Because Chuck, to your point, other communities, at least from appearance, there is solidarity,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like when just from anything that I've seen, when it comes to Haitians in Boston, oh, they show up. When it comes to Asians, they show up, right? I don't think it was a Mayor Wu love fest with all the Asians. However, when I was looking online trying to find any, and I would just look at profile pictures and try to see if there was, I didn't see any slander from her. However, I saw a bunch from us towards, you know, Kim Janey, towards Andrea Campbell, et cetera, et cetera. So
it's always like that.
But what do we do? Because the thing is, this is a double-sided coin. I just put it up loud. I don't know if it'll play or not, but
still frozen.
When someone is, because Leah tells me I'm guilty of putting people on pedestals, right? And just full transparency, Puffy was my idol for years, in the sense of like, this is who did it. This was who it showed me it was possible. Like, I met him, my hands were sweaty, like they were on my jeans. I waited for him for about 45 minutes. He was doing an interview. He came out. I shook his hand. My man was like, "Oh yeah, he raps." And Puff was like, "Oh, let me hear you, yo." And I froze. I couldn't say anything. Like, that's how much he meant to me.
Yeah.
So for me, it's heartbreaking, because it's like, damn, yo, like, you know, Russell Simmons, yes, he did a lot, but his
downfall
and all that stuff was heartbreaking. But Puff and Jay and these are people who I related to. So what putting a button on that, you know, because we love someone's music, or we love someone's fashion, or we love someone's swagger, or we love someone's lifestyle they sell us, doesn't mean that they're not monsters, right? And so what do we do, though, when it comes to protecting our own? Or once you get to a certain level, are you not one of us anymore, in a sense of we don't hold you so sacred and close? And we see this locally, right? Well, Rachel Rollins, right? There's a lot of stuff about her. She just got a job. There's a lot of slander about her new position. When she shows up, people talking behind her back. I see it. Like,
We all see it.
we all see it. Like, what do we do? Like, how do we handle that?
But I think that's a different level of psychology, in that we are drawn to drama. They talk about a drama triangle, right? Like the idea of having something to talk about. And I see that even on social media posts. Post something positive, you may not get any likes. Post something that's negative, and it's going to be a flock of people making comments on it. So I think the psychology of people is almost like, you know, I'm glad to see you take you off the pedestal that you've been placed on. And I think part of it is we do need to realize people are human, right? We they're not beyond making a mistake or falling from grace. And so some people's like that great underdog story, right? I think that some of this is just the psychology of, see, you guys were holding that person to be on a pedestal. Like, now you see, she's just like everybody else, or he's just like everybody else. They're not that perfect. So I wonder if that's some of the psychology is we make people almost have like God complexes, almost like they're beyond approach. And I think that feeds the power dynamic too.
Just a really quick point on that, and I hear what you're saying. Wow, I think I've been able to separate the art from the creator of the art, and I don't use that normally with Diddy, right? I think the first thing that comes to mind with me is Cosby, right? Like I grew up, I tried to build my life around Heathcliff Huxtable, right? Like you guys see the kind of life that I portray on social media and those kind of fun that I'm having with my wife. It's Cliff and Claire over here, right? I've built with that kind of energy. You dig what I mean? Does that also mean that I have to add the Bill Cosby things to that? No, not at all. I'm able to separate the art and what positives I can take from that. And the idea and building the ideologies from that. With Diddy, I mean, listen, no one will ever in the history of history debate his creative merits, right? We wouldn't do that. You'd be a fool if you did. The things that happen behind the scenes, we have to put to the side. This leads to a second point that I wanted to make about our community, because that's where this was going.
Mm-hmm.
There is and has always been, as you heard Mano mention a moment ago, a self-hate within our own community. It's not going anywhere, right? Mm-hmm. The truth of the matter is 55 to 60% of our community don't want to be there. That's the truth of the matter, right? The truth of the matter is a majority of our community would rather be anything else but Black people, right? So then how does the self-hate tie into these kind of conversations, right? Do we stand, we talk about, there was a little bit of fun made with no Diddy and that kind of stuff, right? These kind of negative connotations that float within our community aren't good. They're not good. And we always resort to these type of things. We always resort to either villainy or comedic downfall of our chosen individuals when something is brought up, when there's an accusation brought up. So our community, there's no answer to getting us to do a better job because we've never shown that we could. We've never shown.
But I think those are defense mechanisms. I mean, even if we think about comedy in general, or as the selective outrage. That Chris Rock brought up, right? Like there's a piece of it that we know that those things exist, but we make jokes or normalize it, just like the word, which I don't like, the word nigga or the word bitch, right? We take these things that are not necessarily positive connotations and we put our spins on them, right? And so in a lot of ways, the way that we're dealing with Diddy is to deal with the trauma and the pain of the fact, I think, that he might be another fallen person from grace, right? So we done made a joke out of it. We are, minimizing and downplaying it. This is how we're handling it.
But isn't there immaturity there, right? There's an immaturity of us not to be able to say, hold on a minute. It don't have to be negative. It don't have to be comedic. It could be an opportunity to learn. It could be an opportunity to be a vessel of information. It could be there are so many other emotions we can show outside of angering.
I agree as a therapist, but this is one of the hardest things for people to do is to identify emotions. There's a bandwidth of them, but the ones we're most familiar with, frustration, irritability, anger, right? Those are some of the most common ones.
Yeah.
How about disappointment? How about disgust?
Yeah, see, like I kind of disagree to a degree, because a lot of people's remedy or medicine to disappointment or shock or something, a situation like this, it's a serious situation, but a lot of people like myself laugh to keep from crying. I, like Daniel, myself, Diddy was my idol as far as wanting to make beats and stuff like that coming up. Like I wanted to be the next Diddy, you know what I mean? So like something like this, I'm disappointed, even though it's allegations and we don't know yet what was done and, you know, what happened. But like, I laugh at the memes because I'm laughing to keep from getting depressed about the shit, because that was one of my music heroes.
You're absolutely killing me, Payne. So sorry.
Yeah, don't start, man. Don't
I
start.
laugh
Don't
to
start.
keep from crying.
Don't start.
It's maybe one of the bottom 5 worst statements in the history of history. All you just said is you are finding ways to not deal with the emotion at hand. That's disgusting.
But so Chuck, to that point, why a lot of people high all the time, right? Why people getting drunk all the time? So that's and that's a whole other ball of wax. But like, you know, so the polar opposite of what Payne just said, I'm on, right? So I unfollowed 50 maybe a week ago because enough, right? I don't know if it was funny when he was doing it. It was just like, damn, he's a wild boy. But once the feds raided, right, and you're still going, enough. It's not funny. And I think that there's some personal shit, baby's mother, blah, blah, blah. Either way, like, enough.
Or just laughing at somebody's kids being detained with
it's not. And so the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan famously said, when you see a man fall, don't laugh, learn.
Facts.
Right? Facts. And, you know, I think the difference with this for me, the difference of this and R. Kelly is I remember living in New York and I remember that tape floating around and I remember going to the check cashing spot and buying a tape and seeing it and him saying, that's not me, that's my brother. I saw you and I saw her and I saw what you did, right? I remember that. I looked at the videos with him and Aaliyah dressed alike and like the shit was, so that's different for me. And so Chuck, to your point about separating the artist from the art from the person, with R. Kelly, I don't know. When a woman's fed up, I love that record. I can listen to it forever. Age ain't nothing but a number. Your body's calling. Nah, can't.
It gets a little questionable.
Just can't, because I have daughters. You know what I'm saying?
It makes you look at the lyrics differently. Honestly,
some people
differently when you know some backstory. You know, some of the weird jokes that Bill Cosby would make about pudding pops and just different things. You got different thoughts about some of the innuendos that it could have meant.
Special barbecue sauce and all that. Yeah.
You know, it makes you look at everything differently. Or even recently, shout out to my sister, we were analyzing some of Biggie's lyrics, right? And some of the lyrics that Biggie was saying was like really out there.
It was a different time. I mean, you know, No. It was a different time, you know.
What was so different?
Hey, listen, I'm without even having this scripted, right? This isn't even all right. So Big Timers, right? I bought every Cash Money record that came out, right? Big Timers got a song called Rocky. Bitch, get him done. Bitch, get out of line. Ba 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 ba. Rocky Balboa. They're celebrating, punching it. So it was a different time.
Not no different time. The thing is that let me tell you why it's not different. Right?
Okay.
They're celebrating that shit because that's what the fuck they was doing.
Yes, but
it's not a matter of it being a different time. It's just that's just what it is. And I'm not hiding it because that's who the fuck I am.
It's a different time because
I'm not ashamed of who I am and what I do. That's just what it is.
For me, I
just want to accept that.
No, for me,
you're making excuses for people.
Leah,
yeah.
Are we finished or we done?
Y'all finished or y'all done?
Are we?
In the words of Baby.
well,
Yo, come on, you two.
Right. There's only two female voices on here, and I have to back up Leah on this, right? And that it was bold. It was a different time because it was bold. Just like a lot of things were bold and in your face. And now you know that that's not cool to say.
But
right?
that's what I'm saying.
Cool. It wasn't cool to say then, but you could get away with it in a different way where people were not going to be side-eyeing you.
But that's a good thing.
Said recently about calling out people in your own circle that might be abusing women, and you might know about it, and how some people will still be hanging out with guys like that, knowing that they was knocking their girl out and that was still their boy, and knowing that this woman was going through it. Now there's a change where I hear a lot more brothers saying, yeah, nah, you can't be cool with us. You can't rock with us. You can't hang with us if that's the type of stuff that you do. But that's not what was always happening.
No, it was a lot of
even more cognitive dissonance was the people that was beating their own girl, but if they found out that you was beating their sister, would be upset.
With a double
standard, yeah.
But you know, I the reason why I say it was is because for me, and I've said this publicly, but as an adult, there's a lot of unlearning that I'm doing, right? And I think the brothers that's on this live are doing the same thing in their own individual ways. We are doing a lot of unlearning of shit we grew up in. Yeah. Watching Menace to Society. I remember watching Menace, and when Kane was stomping the dude, I remember laughing. As an adult, I don't find that shit funny. And so I don't watch World Star videos. I don't fucking, you know what I mean? So it's different. And so what I say, you know what I mean? Like ain't no fun if the homies can't have none. Give me Tim's alcohol 10. Like it was a wild time. Right now,
and I have to say,
it's not even a matter of it being. Yes, I guess you can say it was a wild time, but I think the reality is if you think back, if we're actually going back, the reality is that the shit that we was listening to, the age that we were, we didn't really have any business listening to that.
True.
So it wasn't computing to us what was really being said and how it was being said. We're just rocking the beat. Yes, we can hear the lyrics and and listen to how the flow and how the rhymes, how everything was rhyming, but like we're not taking it in and making sense of what's being said.
I think some people just weren't mature enough to give a damn. Like they may have understood the lyrics and just didn't care because they weren't mature enough to.
So hold on. Super young. Two things real quick. First, I'll stay here because I actually do agree with Daniel. It was a different time, and I don't say that to placate the things that happened. I say that to say that we have an accountability now that we didn't have in the mid-90s and early 2000s, right? It was the wild, wild west during those times, and you could do and say whatever you wanted, right? And so that's kind of the nature of what life was. Let me tie that to something else that Daniel mentioned a moment ago. R. Kelly.
Has changed.
So just so that we on the same page, I was listening to 12 Play before this call started, just so that we, you understand where I am.
Yo, made him spit out his water.
R. Kelly, right? The thing why I'm always like free R. Kelly.
I see these fires.
It's because
it got controversial as hell. He just said free R. Kelly.
R. Kelly, Jesus, and the things that are said about R. Kelly.
Come on back, Payne.
Come back.
We're not free R. Kelly.
Free R. Kelly. The thing about it is, we talked about about different times, right? R. Kelly, that wasn't foreign. That wasn't just Chicago. That was at my high school. I saw that daily.
And you have to tell the truth. And this is, again, raise your hand. How many young girls was talking to older guys, right? I was much older than you. I'm talking 5-6 years older than you. It's happening. So there's some truth in that there was a different time.
Of course.
But that don't mean free R. Kelly, though.
No, it's some truth in normalizing where did the behavior come from. And I think one of the things Mano said about I need you to define what sex trafficking is, because again, we got a man who has a private jet, which means he can go wherever he wants to go, right? And he has influence and he has power and he has money. You go over to Colombia, I'm sure he did not have to beat anybody over their head to bring them back to the United States to have a party in his mansion for a bag, right?
Nor did he have to beat, because we mentioned the accusations earlier. There were women in Miami where supposedly Diddy sent Rodney Jones, because y'all got me fucked up with Little Rod. He sent this dude down here and said, yo, go find a couple of women down on Miami Beach at this club, see if they want to come party. Offer them a bag. Them girls wasn't pulled into the back of a van. Yo, here's 2 bins. You want to come party? Yes.
And you do realize sex trafficking also
that's what the accusation
applies to just moving women across state lines.
Yeah.
You can get that.
Absolutely. And that's what R. Kelly's in jail for.
A group of adult dancers from one state to the next, if they choose to engage in some other activities, that could be labeled as sex trafficking.
This is why it's important to understand
the way that you can get these charges placed on you. We got to remember where we are. We are in America, and how these charges, it could be something really.
Well,
we got little kids, right, that are getting charges for sexual assault because they kissed a little girl in school and she didn't want to be kissed. So let's just keep some things into context that we don't know how all of this is manifesting. And there are these areas of gray where people can take these narratives and run with them. If we don't put that out there, then it's like we're just jumping on the bandwagon without all the evidence.
Yeah, and it's it's for men, right? Because I think this is probably normal behavior for a lot of us. If you urinate outside, right, and you get caught,
you're a sex offender. You have to.
That doesn't mean, you know what I mean. So yes, to your point, but Chuck, to the point of, and this is a different. I mean, I guess it's related, but it's a different conversation. The thing with R. Kelly for me, I'll say this. I just want, and it seems like it's never going to happen, at least in my lifetime. I want the justice system in the United States to keep the same energy. I want you to raid Harvey Weinstein the same way you did Puff. I want you to treat Elvis and his legacy the same way you treat R. Kelly, right? There's a movie that just came out about Priscilla, who was, I think, 15, right?
Yeah.
Now, again, with me having daughters, I'm going to handle that a certain way if there's a grown man that is walking around dressing the same as my daughter. And that's just what it is. Mm-hmm. So for R. Kelly, and, goes back into like, he was molested and lied, more than any of us on this call, the people that go through that type of thing, and then they end up repeating it, and the statistics of that, right? So there's a certain amount of grace for him. I think
we got to add into that when we go to that was a different time. If you trace it even further back, you getting married off to an older man as a young woman was part of culture.
That's regular.
Think about the color purple, right? Yeah. So a lot of these things in terms of like unlearning behaviors were passed down in generations in terms of like a woman, as soon as she gets her menstrual cycle, she's now a woman and she's, available to have engage in sex, not necessarily that mentally she's ready for it. So you got to think about, as much as we don't want to talk about these things, a lot of these things are the things that are going on behind the scenes with men, right? And just like young boys being brought to prostitutes when they're like 13 or 14, because that's how you make them be a man. A lot of these things people weren't looking at as molestation of a young boy.
Right.
Like he's not ready for that. So the grown woman who introduces this young man to sex because his uncle brought him there and says it's time for him to be a man, show him what to do.
I mean,
like,
and
what's happening to people?
If we're talking about things that happened in the past, why wasn't this considered sex trafficking? When young girls were sold to their future husbands for a couple of cows and, you know, some cattle.
Mhm.
But
You gotta come with
the
it.
law wasn't created
Southern
at
stuff,
that
yeah.
point.
That's
South.
still the point.
But so
But
to
these
that
are
point,
cultural references that we can't just throw away, though.
there's cultural references, but to that very point, if we want to stay very specific to that, like the law then I mean, it's no different of there's child porn laws and if you send nude
I hear
photos,
all that.
but like I think so there's hypersensitive stuff that happens where like we're afraid to say or do anything because we're going to offend somebody or possibly be whatever. So I think there's overcorrection, but I think there has been course correction that has happened that's needed to happen for civility.
So my
you know what I'm saying?
My point in bringing that up is I do believe that there should be course correction, right? But when we put labels on things and we're talking about specifically sex trafficking, the shit is so broad, right? Like let's try to narrow it down to make it make sense and be fitting for everything and everybody.
Yeah.
And not just
can you have a freak off or a sex party in your house, in your private dwelling with consensual adults? Is that something that is something you can't do because it happens, right? So he's getting, you know, said that he's raping people and he's sex trafficking. And the truth is he has admitted, and people have gone to these freak offs. So they do happen. People use drugs. This happens, guys. So the idea that there's not a potential that he's having his parties and they get wild and people start having sex.
And that's not a question.
So this
that part is not a question.
Happen.
So seeing you because I wanted to go here, right?
The question is that against the law?
Well, so before I get into it,
and that's the question.
Is that against the law?
If they're being recorded,
if I go there and I find out you recorded me because there's cameras everywhere, but I'm going to your house. Who don't know there's cameras everywhere, and I decide to stay and wild out because people do this, guys. People do this. People go out right now and get shit-faced in nightclubs. I didn't see it with my own eyes. That shouldn't be doing that. That got high-profile jobs and people pulling out their phone, right? So there's a certain onus of accountability and responsibility for each one of these people for their behavior. Yes, it was his house, but can I be responsible for everything that everybody is doing in my house? And that's what people are saying too, is that he was a bystander and he allowed things to happen because it was his house.
So sex trafficking, the definition as I'm looking at it, sex trafficking is human trafficking for the purpose of sexual exploitation. It has been called a form of modern slavery because of the way victims are forced into sexual acts non-consensually, right? So for me, that's the defining word, non-consensual. So let's take that and put that in one box. The other piece, and this is just the reality of it, when you are a boss or you are a supervisor, there's just certain things that comes with that job and that role. So if I am the boss of a company and a secretary, and I want to invite her over to the house and maybe kiss her on the neck a little bit and maybe slow dance to 12 play, that's a little different than the mail boy doing it, right? So that is what it is. That's across the board. So
the point goes to that then. If I'm your secretary and you invite me to your house, right, off work hours, and I come willingly, and you didn't say any of that was going to happen, and you approach me in that way, at what point then did you do something wrong if I say stop? So when we look at this Little Rod situation, if what transpired is you're sitting there and you're doing you're mixing or whatever, and someone decides to shoot their shot and see if you're with it, and you say no, did I do something wrong because I attempted and I stopped after you said no?
And that's the issue with the accusation that they have against Cuba Gooding Jr., right?
Right. Like, do you get in trouble for shooting a shot and making an attempt?
Right.
If once the person says, I'm not interested, stop, and you stop, and they still file charges on you, because you tried.
So legally, you don't get in trouble, but HR wise and company policy wise, yes, you can get in trouble.
Yeah.
But
not only HR wise, but public perception, which is what we're talking about tonight.
Isn't that if there's a policy for no fraternizing? If there's no policy that says I can't date my secretary, then what we go back to is moral compass.
Yeah.
And everybody's moral compass, freak nasty, is different. What I think is freaky, what you think is freaky, is not gonna be necessarily the same.
True.
What I'm gonna do and what you're gonna do is not gonna be the same. So are we crucifying people because of our different moral compasses?
And this is what I wanted to mention when you mention other things. So when it comes into the parties, right? And he is not the only one that throws these parties.
Right.
There are people that have sexual fantasies and kinks, and they want to go in a space where they can have those sexual kinks without all of our public shaming and opinions, right?
I'm having one Friday, by the way.
Joe Budden's just talked about that it's a secret world. People move secretly and go to these type of things. And if you're not with it, you don't know about it. If you're with it, you know about it, right?
Yeah.
And they want to be able to do it. And so his thing on his podcast was like, y'all just messed up the freak off parties. Because people enjoy going to them.
You blow it up.
Judge it, but the reality of it is sexuality is very fluid these days. What people are into is just different.
And that's fine. That's fine. The problem is when you are, because one of my favorite episodes of Law and Order involved this very thing. So the problem is with me, it's not the freak off and what people are doing and what people are doing in front of me or behind closed doors. It's when it's assumed that this is a safe space and you are videotaping each room. You are videotaping when I go into the bathroom and wash my hands and make sure I have enough condoms. You are videotaping when I put a Molly on my tongue before I go do what I'm doing. That's my issue. But you're doing that for allegedly. You're doing that
great
for
point.
hours.
You know when people have these big houses that more than likely there's cameras everywhere.
But he still needs to disclose that. He needs to disclose it for two reasons, right? For one, you don't want to record anyone against their will because that's where he's fucked up at now, right? And two, his cameras, he may have thought in a different light. Who knows? I'm just thinking, playing devil's advocate. He may have had the cameras in case some bullshit went on in his house that was wrong that he didn't know about. Okay, someone got raped in my house in what room? Okay, I got the videotape here. It submits it, you know what I mean, as a safety precaution. But
it doesn't. And so speaking from a person where I'm the security guy in the house, right? So I'm the one that automated locks cameras. I'm that guy. It's not for constant 24-hour recording. It's for monitoring if you need to see something real quick or if the alarm goes off and then it records this.
I think people have different types of security.
Sure, right? But then
you had Diddy money. You want your shit on record 24/7.
It would be being recorded.
If you have multiple people in your house, in and out, and you have, expensive ass shit.
I ain't even
gonna be recording.
I ain't even all day, every day.
So let's add in the NDAs. And I think part of this is why now you can't bring your phone in and you got to sign an NDA. Because that became like a wave. And I know I was saying to myself, why is it this shift where people are doing that now? And I think it's speaking to what you're talking about now. Now you're being recorded. So if you know you're being recorded, it's like going into real world, right? You can now try to say, well, they took the wrong clip. But if you go in there willingly, knowing that there's recording and you do mollies and do all of this stuff, you've agreed to it, and which is probably what's going to happen when we talk about how this is going to impact culture. Folks is probably going to be having folks do NDAs and sign off to know that they're being recorded.
Yeah.
Here's the reality. Here's the real truth of the matter is
they already knew.
When we start to have this conversation, right? If we ever got Puff to tell the real situation, it's that he's probably a voyeur. That's probably the truth, right?
Yeah.
He's probably just a guy who likes to see and go off if that's your thing. I just care about disclosure, right? Just say what the fuck it is. That's all I care about. Shout out to Hugh Hefner, who did this for 100 years. and nobody said shit to Hugh Hefner. But go.
Yeah.
See, so
And I think he had major freak off parties.
so I
Oh
think
my God.
I
I
think
mean,
the
it's
difference.
documented.
Yeah, and I think the difference with Puff is like he's been accused of his exes, Cassie, what's her name from the City Girls, etc.
Miami.
Yeah,
Is
Young
she
Miami. So
now too?
he,
I didn't
he
know that.
he travels with them, and supposedly he likes to have people watch people fuck them or whatever, right?
He's a voyeur.
So that could be sex trafficking. That could be categorized as sex trafficking.
Legally, yeah.
Hugh Hefner stayed his ass at the Playboy Mansion. That's not crossing state borders.
But that's
Hugh Hefner flew chicks in.
But
Right.
when you fly him in, it's also an issue.
That's true.
right?
So-
Is it that he's just not smart enough to understand the technicalities, looking for the loopholes, and so now he's put himself into this because he's ticked off maybe the wrong person who knows that this is how he moves, and now here we are, right?
So Luke, so the video that we had, and I'll paraphrase. So Luke had an interview, and those watching, you can go on Google, you can go on YouTube and Google it. Luke interview with Stephen A. Smith. And what Luke said is, when you go in these rooms and you do these deals and you work with these major corporations, ultimately they own you, right? And so that's just part of the deal when you are going in these rooms and making these deals.
But I think a lot of guys like the Diddy's and the Kanye Wests of the world, when you go cut them deals, when you go in the back room and you cut them deals with the major corporations, you need to know where you stand at. You need to know that, that these people really own you. At the end of the day, you need to know how to play the game, and I don't think he played the game in the right way, because at the end, if you're gonna sue the Diageo, you better have your stuff together.
Yeah,
because
they politicians love them.
That politicians love. They're arguably the number one liquor brand in the world. You know what I'm saying? And so at the end of the day, when you look at politics and how politics work, these type of corporations do what? They put money into politicians' campaign funds.
In the world of big business, when you make an enemy of big business, along the way, they know enough about you.
Yes, they do.
To come for you when they want to come for you.
Yes, they do.
You understand? And it don't have to involve jail. It doesn't have to involve a crime. It can involve them squeezing you out of your money.
Yes,
making sure they humble you beyond repair.
And so when you then sue Diageo, which Puff did, and was accusing them of racism and unfair practices and this, that, and the third, which at the same token, Jay-Z did when he filed a lawsuit against
Cristal.
What it wasn't Cristal. It wasn't Cristal. It was
it Ace? Was it Ace?
Because he went into
was it the Bacardi company?
I think Bacardi. Bacardi. Because he then got into business with LVMH. And anyway, so I'm not misquoting. Now I kind of feel like a brilliant idiot podcast. So just throwing out facts. So but Puff, took them on as took on the behemoths that are support
Bacardi over joint cognac, Venture do say.
So Bacardi. Okay. So and he won his case, right? Now it's some differences, but Diageo supports politicians. Diageo is one of the biggest in the game, right? And so when we get into talking about, Russell Simmons, Dame Dash, Jay-Z, Babyface, and all these people who we hold as those guys, right? There are people who are those guys. And so you take those guys on and you don't have a clean backyard, then it just becomes some issues, right? And race is still very much an issue. We're seeing it with Trump going around, regardless if people believe in his policies or not. The fact is, if any one of us had that many indictments, if any one of us had accusations against us, I'm sure our day jobs would be impacted. That's 100% fact. So it's just interesting to me that some people are able to do some, and it's so blatant where it almost makes me as a black man, it's like, damn, what's the point, yo? Like, what's the point of trying to do anything? What's the point of trying to create legacy for my kids? What's the point of trying to be a positive member of society and trying to force course correction with domestic violence? What is the point when it's literally every time we are seeing it? Bill Cosby, whether he did it or not, he was on the verge of buying NBC, and that's why they did that. Who knows, right? And I would appreciate the conspiracy theorists staying out of certain things, at least for a second, because it muddies the water, yo. We can't even get straight answers from anything.
So here's the thing about this. Conspiracy theories,
they stem from somewhere.
Most times they're based in some kind of fact, right? Or at least some kind of
Say that.
logic that makes sense. Let me give you a couple of examples of why it matters in this story. Sean John, and you've heard Kanye speak about this many times. Sean John was a $100 million company, right? You don't think those fashion designers were happy to see Sean John fold like that? I guarantee you they were, right? Bad Boy Entertainment. You don't think those other entertainment companies were happy to see Bad Boy folding the way it is right now? I guarantee you they are. And then someone who caught a stray, but it's another example of how this. So the fact that TD Jakes is involved in this conversation, right?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
You don't think there are other communities, religions, entities who love to see the black church being tied to Puffy in this kind of scandal? Of course they do, right? So there are conspiracy theories that make sense, right? Now, how deep the rabbit hole goes on some of these conversations could be very easy to see, like fashion and Kanye saying, yo, this is what Adidas does, this is what Dolce & Gabbana. Okay, I believe you, Kanye. And now I see they all benefit from this story. They all do.
So I love it. Oh, go on. Well, go on. Yeah.
Judging some of the biggest icons. So in being able to sort of tear them down, it accomplishes exactly what you just said, DL. What's the point? If you think about why they would hang a slave or beat them in front of all the other slaves, was to get you to not want to pursue it anymore. It was a great mind fuck, right? So now everybody's too scared to try to run, too scared to do anything. So I think if we would stay with his allegations and use our logic to understand that we do not have all of the information and not jump on the witch hunt of crucifying Puffy without having everything, that's the first thing we could do as a community. Is one, what are the facts? Not trying to analyze it and he's my icon and I love him, but just what are the facts? And I think, again, I wish we could play all the clips, but Mano said it well. Explain to me the definition of that first. Ask more questions. Be more curious. That's what I use as a psychotherapist, right? Is that you don't jump in and generalize and start catastrophizing it. You stop, you pause, and you ask questions. What does that mean? Well, how did they get to that point? What evidence do they have for that charge? What grounds did they have to go to both of his homes like that and detain his kids? What are they looking for? And did they need to do all of that with that much military force for this man? Right. Like, there was an extreme amount of resources used and you found nothing? Where are all of the sex trafficked girls? Are they in the basement? Right? Like, we justify military force to that level as if he was some kind of terrorist.
The second point,
it. Like,
there's a second point to that, La, as well, right? So, and what you're doing right now is a beautiful delivery of, hey, listen, black community, keep this in mind, right? That's a great starting point. Here's a second point. And I'll quote the second greatest rapper of all time. I thought this was America, people. That means, wait a motherfucking minute. You're innocent until you're proven guilty, right? And our community needs to do a better job of reminding that, right? Don't make that.
To quote Charlemagne, nobody cares about the truth when a lie is more entertaining.
That part. And the thing is, this we can
That's
all
goofy.
be at the butt end of this at some point. The more you are sitting up cheering on somebody else's demise, how would you feel being in this same position with people
Absolutely.
already running with a narrative without all of the information? Guilty or not?
Yeah.
It's one thing if you have the information and you're condemning them, but you're condemning them as soon as someone comes up and says something. And it's crazy because like we all just said, it's mainly our community doing it to our own people.
Yeah.
It's guilty until proven innocent. But then when it's something where our people are fighting against like the court systems of America, like not so much a celebrity, but like just someone you know what I mean? You want them innocent until proven guilty. You can't have it both ways.
That part. So, right, if it's your family member, you don't want them to throw the whole book at them first. You want to talk about all of the good they did in the world. You want character references and letters to be sent on their behalf. And you're saying give them another chance. And you want us to understand all of the reasons and facts of how they ended up in this situation. When it falls in your house, when it falls in your house, right? When it's your brother, your cousin, your husband, then it's like, hold up, pause. At the end of the day, that's somebody's father. And there's a whole nother side of Puff being with his kids, supporting his kids, all this other stuff. And I'm not saying he didn't have these freak off parties. I'm not saying he's not gay. But then all of that comes into it. Well, he's been gay for a long time. He likes, this and he likes that. But what's that have to do with the magnitude of the charges and the military force that was brought to his home like that? Like, do you need all of that to go see if he's sex trafficking?
So this is when
his gang and his military people with guns outside. It's not like a Cuban, what's that movie we all like, Scarface kind of thing, where everybody's outside with guns. So why did you go into this man's house? I mean, it was like they were going to war.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, and then I guess the question was too, how did all the cameras, why were all the cameras out there? TMZ and the media, how are they out there at that particular time at both locations
that quick?
Well, so those things, I don't know. A lot of times they say that the stars themselves alert the paparazzi. I doubt Puff did that, but I know they know allegations were out against him, so they probably had people there waiting 24/7. But that whole excessive force thing, I don't know if anyone remembers that Chappelle skit when he basically said how they go after those white CEOs of companies and the difference between how they go after them and how they go after drug dealers. They'll call and schedule with the Harvey Weinstein or Epstein, right?
Yeah.
If you're black, they're kicking in your door.
Right. Yeah. And not to mention you're being walked out.
Right.
Well, we seen it with Killer Mike at the Grammys.
Yeah.
And that wasn't even a police officer. That you know what I mean? That was a citizen's arrest, I heard. But Chuck, I know you had something about gatekeepers. Did you want to pose that question? Because I think that might be timely.
I don't remember the question. I don't remember the notes.
It was hip hop was built in getting a pass from a gatekeeper when the gatekeepers have their own objectives outside of music.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a discussion point for sure, because Daniel, you might remember this. There was this whole Jack the Rapper time period in the 90s, right? Where you had to go through certain people in order to get certain places. I'm diving into making films. You've been down this alley as well, right? You've got to go through certain people to get certain things that you need in that industry, right? And so then when they say, yeah, well, we can do that for you, but it's going to require this, right? How does that, because it was regular course of life, right? That's just, like, it's still present today. You hear about it all the time in Hollywood. We just saw this whole Nickelodeon thing explode, which that guy hasn't been brought up on anything either, by the way.
Right.
So we see that there are still gatekeepers. Diddy was absolutely a gatekeeper. But how does that still, or how is it, or why is it still in existence now with where we are as a culture after Me Too, after these other kind of social initiatives to keep gatekeepers at bay, but that culture is still underlying. So I just wonder how that still ties in today's world. And how does it tie to Puff? Because Puff is living by those rules, clearly.
I don't know.
I think it's still about power. I mean, honestly, I think there's no way to get the amount of money and influence without power. And gatekeeping is a certain level of power. We think we only talk about positional power, but when you have influence and money and you're on TV and, Puffy could get on social media and do a call to action, you have power. I remember there was a clip where they talked about Malcolm X and how Malcolm X could come out and calm the crowd and get people to leave. And the police officer saying no one man should have that type of power to control people and get people to do a particular thing. So when you're able to do that, that's threatening. That's a threatening position to be.
Well, as a black man.
Right. And like you just said, you shared, DL, you were excited to see Puffy and couldn't even speak, right? We think about the level of success Beyonce and Michael Jackson, when people are passing out just from getting close to them. Like that is mind-boggling influence for me. When just knowing that you're going to meet somebody and you're standing next to them, people are losing their whole sense of self. So, right? They're just human beings, right? She's an entertainer. She's up there with her feet hurting and she's dancing and she's singing, but the influence that has is powerful.
So let me bring this back to why this came up at all. The conversation of gatekeepers comes up because that's where Rod, and I'm not going to give, he's not even going to be a Jones because you got me fucked up again. He's just Rod. But that's where he comes into this story, right? Because he is a guy, I want to be a producer, right? And I want to work with the best, right? And Puff is like, you can work with the best. You dig? So now, where is the self accountability? Right? Where does Rod have to say, this is my moral compass. These are my goals. How do they align? At some point, Rod got to say to himself, "Hey man, this ain't for me. I'm gonna go over to Wu-Tang and see if they looking for something. Because this bad boy shit don't work for me. You have an accountability to yourself to be like, hey man, this ain't my vibe, and there's no judgment there.
Yeah,
we live. Thank you, princess. We live in a world where people don't want that self accountability either. It's easy to point the finger and say, "Oh, you made me." From everything I read in the accusations, Puff said, "Hey, it would be good if you did this," and he fell victim to the gatekeeper, feeling like he was going to get additional looks.
Well, which is similar to the Lizzo thing with her dancers, right? Where it was this whole right. And so, to your point, yes, and I want to just also insert pause. I want to insert the because I want to get into that too, and I said that on purpose, right? But I want to insert the Touré. I don't know if you all saw the Touré interview.
Yeah.
So now
His nephew.
I believe him. Where Chuck, did you hear about this?
No, I did not. Can you catch me up?
So basically, him and Puff had so Touré and Puff have a cordial relationship enough where like Touré called him and asked, "Hey, I want you to hire my nephew for an intern."
He just said family member.
I think it was his nephew.
Family member.
Oh, it's family.
Nephew.
Did he say nephew?
He did. I thought he said nephew too.
Family member. So he wanted him to hire him as an intern. Puff hired him. You know, they did a bunch of traveling, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden the internship abruptly ended. And he was like, "Oh, what happened?" He never talked about it. So not too long ago, he told him what happened. And so Puff said, "Yo, I want you to come home with me. I want you to spend the night." And the family member was like, "No." And then he was like, "Well, you're out." And so now, you know, so that's his story, right? So how many people actually went home and spent the night?
Right.
Now, you know, there are some people who, if they really want to nail the coffin of Sean Puff Daddy Combs, they can.
Possibly.
And those people
are not going to say nothing.
Huh?
So not the talk.
Well, they won't say anything for the same reasons. While I think all of us on this live know women who were abused, whether sexually or physically violent. Like, we all know them, but we also don't know some women who have chosen to not make that their story because they don't want to share that because it's no one else's business.
Nope,
right?
they come to therapy with it instead.
So Usher, who has made comments in an interview and say, yeah, when I used to, now his mother letting him go back and forth and stay at Puffy's house, wild to me, right? Wild.
He said he would never let his kids go to where he went. He said, absolutely not.
That says a lot without saying a lot. So Usher, Farnsworth Bentley,
Where is he at?
Exactly. So
it's like a job interview, right? You ever, because technically you're not supposed to do a defamation of character when you call for a job reference, right? But they asked this key question: would you rehire the person? That is the trick question of all trick questions, right? Because once the job says no, it's almost an unsaid said that that's it, right? Like you were already saying, I wouldn't bring this person back on. They won't ask any more questions when you do the interview anymore. That question is a trick question to get. And I think that is what's going on here. Like, I don't think some people are going to say anything because they don't even want to be associated with this.
No, and they don't have to, right? I think we want it, not we
black people.
Jeez. So I think that people want that because it's the salaciousness and it's tea and all that good stuff, but like, it's not their bag. Usher is Usher. Usher doesn't need to be associated with this legacy that's being played out.
Think about all the years that Aaliyah never said anything about what happened with her and R. Kelly, though.
Yeah.
Her career grew exponentially, but Aaliyah never ever went. I don't know of one interview, unless y'all could tell me one, where she went on record talking about what transpired between her and R. Kelly.
No.
So for years, people said, well, Aaliyah ain't said nothing about it, right? So it must not have really happened, or maybe it wasn't true, right? Now here we got all these years later, we find out everything that back then, as a young woman, they were like, oh, R. Kelly married Aaliyah. He's having a sexual relationship with Aaliyah. Then people said it was a conspiracy. It wasn't true. I was like, oh, no, that ain't what's going on. Here I am now in my 40s, and everything back then was true. It was true. He did marry her. He was not with Aaliyah. Like, it was true.
And he was hiding in plain sight. So for me, and without rehashing the R. Kelly thing, I wanted, so this point, Chuck, to what you said, I think that for me, there's a difference because, again, today, as the man that I am and the man that I'm trying to be, there's certain things that's just unacceptable behavior that whether you're my friend and I can call you on a phone, or you are someone I see on TV or hear on the radio. And so to have all these enablers where, to me, they are just as guilty and they should have time also, right? To be going to high schools as a grown man, to be doing certain things and having beds in studios supposedly and all this type of stuff. And I feel the same way about Blueface, and Blueface is younger, but Blueface has like a harem in his house. It's weird, but that's all power and that's all desperation. And it's all people, unfortunately, and my assumption is they don't have the same structure of household that Leah and I have created, where our daughters are not going to be as susceptible to doing that type of shit.
At least we hope they won't.
God willing.
Well, and I mean, the thing is, right, here we go back to, as a parent, if your child wants to have a music career, and you meet this producer that says he's going to help her out, do you think that this producer is AKA a pedophile and is going to be doing these things?
That's a lead story.
That's where the influence comes in at, is that if you're making really good records and things are going well, and you know how kids can be, young people can be, maybe you will go along with it because you want to be famous.
As a parent, I'm not, I don't care what that producer is or how great they are. My kid is not staying with you without me.
But that's literally Aaliyah's story. Literally, to a letter. That's Aaliyah's story, right? There were other girls there who were singers who were going there to make music. Just so happens that she ended up, doing things with R. That's literally the story. The parents were bringing her there, right? But what we're talking about a little bit tonight is there's some accountability in other places outside of the villains.
Yeah. Sure.
There's other motherfuckers involved. You see what I'm saying? 100%. And we're not just going to say, okay, well, we'll brush your part of this under the rug. I can't do that.
Well, and it's also grooming. It's also grooming. Again, when you're a young person and you're poverty-stricken and you got a dream and someone dangles this carrot in front of you and you feel like that's what you got to do.
Well, it's predatory.
It is, but again, it happens. It happens on so many levels, from jobs to getting into schools. Like coaches, the power and the influence matters because professors do this to students.
Yeah,
it's not. It happens.
But I think when it comes to, and so Chuck, to your point, because I was gonna mention this part, I don't so much respect and give awards to the whistleblowers that now come after the fact and they want to tell their story and say how wrong this person was, because when it was the gravy train, everything was fine and dandy.
I agree with you.
Right. And I'll put this out, right? So I think Payne, so what you said, like I wouldn't be that type of parent, right? And I believe your words and I feel the same way. But I also feel like it's easy to say that because those decisions are not in front of us.
Absolutely.
Because we all say, I would never do no shit like blah, 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 no way, right? But then when you are alone and it's not this live for everyone to judge us and everyone is watching and we're private behind closed doors and figuring out what we're going to do, things sometimes change. And so for me personally, one of the most special people I've ever met in my entire life, Miss Bilal. Leah.
I'm just saying, Go ahead.
You think I'm talking about?
Go ahead.
Anyway, so
too cute.
So Miss Bilal, Zuhaira Bilal, she was a art teacher at the Lewis Middle School, right? And just one of those people that's like, oh my God, yo. And she was so dope, fashionable, and just could draw her ass off. Muslim woman, right? And like I remember I was like, yo, she was just so dope. And she didn't have any children. And she sometimes would have I don't even know but it would be like a movie night and it would be we would draw or whatever, and she would have like people at her house and kids at her house. I remember I went to ask my mother and she said, fuck no. Who the fuck is this blah, 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 blah. Right. And I'm like, no, because my mother's like, no. Right. And I think oftentimes and I've never had this conversation with my mother. And if I did, I wouldn't put that out. But I want to frame this to say, I don't know if she's had history with abuse as far as sexual abuse. But when a woman is sexually abused, they are a little more inclined of like, I'm not doing that. I'm not putting my child in that space.
Everything's a red flag. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So,
and I have to add to that. I think not even if it's just that growing up in a culture where you've heard about it, I could not spend the night over people's houses.
Sure.
Right. My son couldn't go over to people's houses because I knew that people did stuff to little boys too. They just don't talk about it. Right.
Here's the thing. At some point, you have to trust in the lessons and the values that you've given your teens, right? As you send them off into this world. I was always at somebody's house, literally always, right? And it was, before I went, hey, remember what the fuck I told you? Okay, I got you. You know what I mean? Like you.
I mean, that's when you're older. I'm talking about when they're younger, though.
What age are we talking about, though, Chuck?
What age are you talking about that you letting your kid go? Spend the night at people's houses.
Oh my God. Hey man, get the fuck out of here. 6 years old. Give me a free weekend, B. I don't need this shit here.
Well, that's because you want to have your own freak off.
So let's clarify though.
Absolutely.
You're letting them go over people's houses that you feel comfortable with and you know.
Of course.
Right. So I think most people who have gone through some sexual abuse, truth be told, is people that they're comfortable with and that they know. It's not normally a stranger off the street.
Yes, no one would have.
So I think that we just having to give your kids the pep talk about your private parts and not letting anybody touch you is some stuff that was new. I don't think everybody was doing that earlier on because folks wasn't thinking that people would do these things to their kids, but we know that it has happened. So now you're teaching your kid about somebody does that, tell an adult, and you're telling
them. And that still doesn't ensure that they're going to tell you, because that's a whole other thing that happens. Don't tell you, blah, blah, blah. It's a whole, and so, I'm not asking for transparency from the guys that's on this call, but what I will share and what I will say is my first sexual experience is when I was 8 years old, right? And it was with my tutor down south who was 13. I initiated it, so I thought, right? I had these thoughts of, I'm not sure why I had these thoughts, but I had these thoughts. I'm like, blah, blah, blah. And so we ended up doing it. Now, babe,
go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Leah.
You're welcome.
Jesus. So, so I actually made a record later on in life, it's a song called Reminisce, and I reference it. And I would tell people proudly, like, yeah, I lost, I had sex when I was 8 years old, blah, blah, blah. And whenever I would say that, my aunt would be mortified. You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't until my son, who's older now, but when he was 8 years old and I looked at him, I said, holy shit, I couldn't imagine him having sex with somebody. And I then realized that I was assaulted. I didn't live my life as a victim or that somebody grabbed me and had their way with me, right? But that's also a matter of just inappropriateness. And so she should have known better. But for all I know, she might have been abused, and it was a whole fucking mess. So I'm bringing it up to say, like, even if it's not a forceful attack, there can be just inappropriateness that can happen when you let your kids go somewhere, right? And so
they would call that experimentation, given the ages and stuff. So there's a lot of layers to this, and a lot of people don't come out with stuff like that until they come to therapy and remember maybe why they have sexual challenges or intimacy issues, and all this stuff starts coming out. So I do think there's a delayed understanding of some of these things depending on when it's introduced. I also think when a younger woman is with an older guy, there's a level of influence. If he has money, he has prestige. You also have to remember at that time, Cassie was also pursuing her record, her career in the music industry too. It was definitely doors and rooms she was getting into because she was with Diddy, and for 10 years, right? And they say it takes an average of 7 to 10 times for most women to leave an abusive relationship. It doesn't just happen quickly, right? So there's just so many layers to her story that it's hard to just be like, he was never abusive to her. None of that happened. Now, and in terms of rapes too, this last piece, I have had women who are married say that their husband raped them because they didn't want it, but their husband still pursued it. The husband doesn't feel like it was rape because you're his wife.
Yeah.
Right. So there's so many layers to this. It's not just straight black and white. There's a lot of gray.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you.
And then just speaking of the power, just to piggyback off of that, speaking of the power, as soon as she left them doors shut, right? What happened to her music?
Career was done.
What happened to her acting? All of it, just done.
And I want to ask Lars, because you mentioned this, and I know we're coming. We originally said
90 minutes.
Yeah, but so I think
it'll be a 2-hour conversation.
So let's.
You don't listen.
I don't need.
Just go ahead, ask the question.
Jeez, Louise, Papa Cheese. So, and this is for this is for everyone, and I especially want to hear the men's point of view. No offense, ladies, but why is
taken? Go ahead.
Oh, I thought you said take that. I was about to be like, yo, inappropriate.
Yeah.
So why is it still such a thing where women are not believed in assault cases?
Yeah.
Why is it automatically assumed that they are lying and it's not? Let's look at the facts. Let's look at what we know. It's automatically like, and especially when it's power, you know what I'm saying? We're not talking about 2 Starbucks employees.
But even there, sometimes.
Well, Yeah.
I mean, is it though? I always feel like it's the guy that's looked at as the liar, unless it's someone that takes a long time to come out. Then people kind of side eye it, which they shouldn't, because people react to shit differently. I mean, sometimes people have to internalize, figure shit out, and then come out with it, or they might be scared to or whatever. I think that's the only time that people think that they're lying or whatever. Any other time someone comes out with this type of allegation, in my case, I assume that they're telling the truth, but I wait till facts are all presented.
So what you just said, so you said depending on when they come out and say it?
I think that's what society does. If they come out later on and say it, people are like, well, why didn't you come out before? So they kind of side eye and don't believe it.
And exactly. And people just don't understand that that's just not how abuse works. Mm-hmm. It's not an immediate, you slap me in the face, I'm going to report you. It doesn't work that way. And so it's just interesting it's just interesting that we talk out of, it's why I love Tupac so much, right? You had Brenda's got a baby, you got I get around, wonder why he call you bitch, you know what I mean? But it's protect Black women. Really? Okay, show me, right? Like what are we saying exactly? And protect all women. But when we say like protect Black women, what's up, Queen? Really? Okay.
Chef, do you have an opinion on this?
I mean, I agree with Payne to follow up. I feel like one thing is when people like hold off or take so long, it feels like because you took so long, like why were you hold on to it all this time? Like, you know what I mean? Like you must be lying or whatever the case may be. It must be a money grab, something like that. That's what it always feels like. So I have to agree with Payne on that.
So Coach La, Leah, Daniel, you have been introduced to Payne and Chef, and this ain't the first time they're wrong. It won't be the last. They're wrong quite often. And this is just another one of those examples. Here's the truth of the matter. I said this recently in the conversation. I believe it was with you folks actually as we were setting up for this call, and I said I still have Emmett Till scar tissue, right? Which means that you got to prove it to me, right? Now, right or wrong, I get it. But this is a story of a woman who said some shit because she felt some kind of way. And the reality of today's world is women say shit because they feel some kind of way sometimes, right? That's just the truth of life. So when we hear about allegations, damn, that's fucked up. Let's discuss that. How let's dive into the details, right? But too many times in my life, when I hear about these kind of stories, the origin of it is really, oh, well, she was mad and she created a story to help her feel better. It's a very tit for tat environment. The fellas know how I feel about tit for tat. I don't, and it comes from this kind of stuff.
I like tits, Chuck.
Yeah. Friday, you pull up. No, I just think that I've seen so many stories where women made up false accusations that I am in a space now where I gotta see the Carfax a little bit, and I can understand how that sounds, but it's been a reality that I've seen way too many times.
Let me ask you this, because I appreciate I don't think the vulnerability is the word I'm looking for. I appreciate the honesty in that answer. What are you drinking? A hot toddy?
No, wife brought me some kind of tea. Who knows what it's for?
Ooh. Yeah. Let's end this live soon because I don't know how much longer you got.
That's what they call like the horny goat.
Right.
So I think there's a difference of you having that discernment internally, right? Versus publicly going online under comments and saying stuff and making videos and making lives. And, I think there's a difference of that. And I don't know if that's what you do. I would think not. I don't know. But I feel like that is not necessary. I don't know if that's helpful in the argument when people do that. I feel like social media has and I guess we're doing it now, right? People can say, who the fuck are y'all? Won't y'all shut up? Right. But I think that everyone feels the need to chime in.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's Mike Epps, we just talked about on our show. Mike Epps made his comment saying, he wants to, 100% treat a woman right. And that's his goal. That's what he wants to do before he dies. And he feel like he's failed so many times. And people are, how dare you? And that's disrespectful to your wife. And like, he said something, like that's his truth. Let him say his piece. Yeah. So I just think that, is there a difference for you of feeling that way and wanting to see all the facts and peel back the layers versus like going almost on a campaign where you are like, fuck that. She's, I've seen this too many times and she's lying. Do you think there's a difference in that?
So I think from time to time on our show, we bring up real life cases and real life stories about things that happen. And not that it's a campaign, but I'm pretty consistent in my message, right? I'm pretty consistent in that, listen, man, if you genuinely been through some shit that's wild, I feel for you. If there's anything I can do, I'm here. But if you are one of these scallywags who have just decided to create a story,
you just showed your age.
No, come back, Payne. Come back, Payne. Come back.
Project. Project Chuck.
Yo, come on.
Scallywag.
Project Pat.
Right.
Yo,
like, you don't have to give a whole what do you call that? Appendix for the vocabulary.
I love that word, yo. That word makes me laugh.
If you are that, right? If you are, it's important that we see. Here's what we don't do. Here's what we don't do in today's world. Protect Black women. That's all you hear. You've been hearing it since 2009, right? 15 years now. How about protect our sons too? Like, protect them.
That part, because I have a whole son, and I just think that it's a setup. I really
protect
do.
the sons. So when there's an opportunity like this coming, and hey yo, keep an eye, make sure that she's not just creating things. Be mindful of that. Protect them, and somebody's got to give them that lesson, right? But because you can be put in a box if you say that, you got to believe everything women say.
No, how about you don't let any and every woman come to your dorm room, right? How about you don't put yourself in a position that they could say you did something to them if you don't have them in your dorm room behind closed doors where there's no other witnesses but you and that person. How about that, right? Like,
I'm sorry, Coach. You just said don't invite a girl to your room. Is that what you just told me?
I said, how about you don't just bring random females to your room where they can accuse you of doing something to them.
She said it.
Yeah, that's what I said.
That's my 20s. So
but that's accountability though, and
right, you said protect our sons. I'm like, are we giving them, meaning our sons, the tools to prevent them from potentially having a case brought on them? And they're like, Mom, but I didn't do anything. She said no, and I stopped. Are we protecting our sons so that they're not having children with women that are literally going to make them be the source of the income for the rest of their life for having sex at the time because they don't have the condoms or they're not doing the things they need to do to protect themselves? I do think we don't teach young men the same thing we teach young girls.
We don't.
Young girls, you're sacred. Your body's a temple. Wait, hold until you get a man who respects you. In the meantime, these dudes is out here tricking off. So what are you getting? It's okay for him to be used 150 however many times and have tons and tons of bodies, and he's still seen as the same prize.
Yeah, you about to go down in a rabbit hole with that one.
I mean, I might be, but I'm just saying, as we talk about protecting, we don't send the same messaging often of men valuing themselves that same way, right? I think a man has way more value than his penis or how much money he makes.
But a man is not devalued by Well, okay. This is
so for sure, and I've shared this with Leah before. So I remember, why are you looking at me? Look at the screen.
I'm just want to be clear on what you shared with me.
Jeez Louise.
And if it's okay to share with everybody else.
It's my story. I'll share. So my father told me a long time ago, you know what I'm saying? Like, what you have is a mystery. I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember the exact thing, but be mindful of who I share the mystery with, because once the mystery is revealed, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's revealed, and then the woman can move on, right? I remember him saying something like that. I remember going to school with guys who was just having sex with anybody. And my man that I went to school with, I remember coming out of school and he was having sex with this girl behind a dumpster. And I remember saying, like, Jesus, you know what I'm saying? And so I knew. And I also remember being on a party line, right, back in the days. And I remember going to, it was a meetup. It ended up being an orgy party, right? And so I remember walking through and like looking, and I remember seeing like 6 or 7 dudes, and there was this one girl. And then fast forward, it wasn't like I was definitely in my voyeur bag. I just like to watch all of that. Come to find out, the girl who was having sex with 6, 7 dudes, probably more that I didn't see. It came out later on. She has HIV.
Oh no!
Exactly.
Wait, Payne, if you don't keep going off camera.
And so for me, that's gonna be the hashtag. Come back, Payne.
Come on, man.
That's wild.
So it reiterated to me. So literally, it was like a series. So like my life has a bunch of bookmarks. So my father saying that, I'm like, oh, okay. But to your point, it's giving me the same conversation that we would give our daughters, that young men are not given. The same way I talk to my daughters about, don't put your hands on people. I'm almost positive that people who are raising daughters are not telling them that. They're telling young boys don't hit girls, but they're not telling girls don't hit guys. So if you hit a guy that's not wound tight enough,
I tell mine that.
How's that go? I remember watching Jerry Springer, and the girls would kick the dudes in the nuts. Now, my mother, because she grew up a certain way, said if a girl puts your hands on you, you hit her back. Now, there's some nuance with that, right? Because I was smaller, and it was real Amazon girls, and they would like push me and shit. And so I remember I punched a girl in the arm.
Why she got to be an Amazon girl, though?
Oh, because you. Let's move on. So after I did that, she stopped. So that let me know at an early age, okay, you know what I'm saying? Now, would I ever tell my son that? Absolutely not. But I feel like Leah is the type that would be like, yo, somebody put your hands on them. Now, she may not say that to our son. So
come get me.
Well, that's not good. That's not good either. Anyway, so I just think that, we don't have the same messages for our young boys that we do with our young girls. No, and sure. I don't know if that's ever going to change. I wish it would, because as people, as a community, we are so under attack with everything, whether it's fucking DEI stuff, whether it's history being erased from books. We don't have the luxury and the privilege of discarding each other. And I'm also tired of like, we're not all the same. Black people are not monolithic. I always say maybe we should be a little more monolithic. And what I mean by that is, again, we don't have the space for the fucking weirdness. So Candace Owens and the shit that she may spew that might be harmful, right? And can be used against us. We don't have space for that. We need everyone. If we're all gonna on this live say, yo, we're boycotting stashes because of that shit they pulled, I need everybody on this live and everybody watching. We are boycotting, and that's it. I don't need Chuck to fucking go order on Uber Eats because they got good pizza. I need us all to be on the same accord.
Here's the problem. The problem is we started this conversation out by saying very clearly, at least I did from my standpoint and from the things that I've seen, that 60% of us don't want to be a part of the community.
Fair enough.
So that what you're asking for is unrealistic. right?
Yeah.
Secondly, you want our young boys and young girls to play in the same field. We're dancing way away from where we're supposed to be, but that's okay. I'm here for it. I tell my boys, you are a king, and you treat your queen as such, right? That's a totally different message than what I tell my little sister. You are a queen. You treat your king as such. Totally different message. There's totally different venues of what we're talking about, right? According to what you guys are asking, everybody's royalty. Treat each other like royalty. That's not how life works, right? As a man, your job is to protect your lady. Your job is to provide for your lady. That's your job as a man. I'm not gonna say that to my little sister. It's not her job. It's not her role. You know, so I very much understand where lines are for men and women, young and old, right? And you're giving them the game young allows them to grow into that game. You know what I mean? That's all it is. Women, your body is a temple, right? Respect that, you know, so that you can be that queen when your king comes.
So I think tying it all together, because I know you said you feel like we're dancing somewhere else. I think it goes back to how we look at and identify ourselves. Like, what's your self-narrative and how you feel about yourself? So if you grew up in an environment where you weren't being uplifted, you weren't given these positive messages, when you do get power and influence and all of these things, right? The way your ego is going to be driven and your moral compass and how you roll and how you move and your values and your core beliefs are going to make you subjected to maybe some things that maybe your son or daughter or your sister or whatever wouldn't even entertain because of how you were raised and because of what you were influenced in. You wouldn't even think about hosting a freak party, right? You know what I mean? You wouldn't, you just certain things you may not even entertain or do. Or when the party gets to a certain time and it's like 1 o'clock and you're a single woman, you're already saying, okay, it's time for me to go. Or you're not going to take a drink from some random person. You're not going to be doing drugs with a group of people you don't know, not knowing what's going to happen to you. Your decision-making skills will look different and be different when you have certain things instilled in you about who you are and where your worth and where your value comes from. And I think when I say we don't teach men and women the same things, if you don't feel valuable as a man and your only value comes from what you can do with your penis and how much money you have, then that's where you derive your power from. And I think this is what creates narcissistic personality types, egotistical people who are manipulative or taking advantage of other people, is because they've never felt powerful. So you give somebody who's never felt powerful, never felt like they were handsome, never had any clout, right? And you give them power. What are they going to do with it? They could be abusive with it.
And that's
so it's a drug. They can be, or they could, it's like sex, right? So there's two different things, right? Isn't there two different?
I mean, I'm not saying that there's not outliers. I'm just saying that the recipe of someone who's felt powerless and felt bullied, felt mistreated, felt ugly, felt unwanted, felt like they had no value, right? And they finally make it. The energy that they're going to have versus someone who's always felt like they were somebody is going to look quite different.
Very different.
I think very few people are walking around with the mantra and the mindset of be the change that you want to see in the world. And oftentimes we are, the wrongs that are done to us, and it's in so many different industries, the wrongs that was done to us, I'm going to show them when I get it. I'm going to show them. So, a lot of correction officers, you know what I'm saying? Police officers, and people who were bullied, people who were picked on, the people that were picked last for teams, right? And so now I got the power to pull you over. I got the power to tell you now you can go. So all that plays out. So what I wanted to say as we're closing, because it's in line with what we just talked about, what do we say? So each of us, if we can chime in, what do we say to those who stand by and witness wrongdoings, and don't say anything? Part B is, what do you say to people who witness it and they enable it?
Run that back one more time.
What do we say to those who stand by and witness wrongdoings And then part B is, what do we say to those who are witnessing it and they're also enabling said behavior?
I mean, you're just as guilty as the person committing the act. You know, with so many words, yeah.
The first part, I think, like we covered it a couple weeks, I think last week or whenever we spoke on Diddy briefly. There was a clip of his neighbor, I think in LA, when they raided the house, and he came out and he's like, "Whoa, yeah, tell them to stop busting in these loads of kids. Why the fuck you ain't saying nothing? You wait until the cameras are out here, now you want to play super saver hole." Like, no, you should have said something when you seen it. That's sucker shit to me, the first part. The second part is, like Maine said, you're just as guilty as them if you're enabling them to do it.
But what does that guilt? I mean, that guilt doesn't equate to jail time. It doesn't equate to public shaming. It doesn't equate to lost dollars. Like, what does that mean?
It can equate to jail time.
I mean, it just shows your morals. You know, it's a moral thing, if anything.
You can be sometimes put as an accessory.
An accessory, absolutely.
Yeah, it would depend. I mean, it depends on what we're talking. So, you know, the people who were like on camera enabling the behaviors of R. Kelly, they didn't get jail time. Like they're out. You know what I'm saying? Now, you know, I don't know. I don't even want to pull Trump into, you know, there are people that was arrested or whatever, but that's a whole that shit's a mess. But it doesn't always equate to jail time, is my point.
It might not always equate to jail time, but there is a possibility of that, right? Then there's also the possibility of public shame. Then there's also the possibility of now you are unemployed. Like there are consequences. There can be consequences to it at the end of the day.
I think if we were to take that type of a stance across the board, it may change things. So even if it was a situation of somebody's your friend or you're looking out for each other and you pull a person aside, you know, the elders used to say, you know, don't let your slip show, you know, and a person would tell you, like, fix your slip, you know, if, you know, to see you not doing the right thing, neighbors would step in with people's kids and say, hey, you ain't supposed to be doing that, cut it out. I think there's a certain amount now, it's like, mind your business. Right? Stay out of your business. If it don't have nothing to do with you, you know, you stay out of it. So we would have to be in each other's business a little bit and be able to have permission to hold each other accountable and be open to feedback. A lot of people don't want feedback and don't want to be corrected about anything. People want to do what they want to do, how they want to do it. So I think there's a part of how much of this becomes our responsibility as a society and what are we supposed to do in terms of holding each other accountable to do what we think is right. And then we go back to, that's a subjective term, because what's right? And I think that's why this is difficult, is that, am I a bystander or am I minding my business? Like, at what part am I now becoming a Karen?
There has to be a conversation about the line of embarkation, right? If we're talking about legalities, nah, man.
Hopefully y'all know what a Karen is.
You got to step in. You got to say something. You got to handle that the right way, right? But one thing we find consistently is that people got different moral compasses, right?
Sure.
And so, you were just condemning the woman having sex behind the dumpster, and I was just Googling her, right? So there's different kind of things about what we're looking for in life, right? So I don't know.
You gotta relax.
If there's a legality, why you? Hold on. Sorry, wife's throwing shit in here. It's getting.
Well, it's great things he said.
Legality about to start kicking in the second.
Moralities. Not that I mind your business, but I think I can let you know, yo, that's gonna lead you down a dark path. That's my piece. You know, but we have to understand our role in those lives before we make comments.
A certain level of bravery to stand out and be the person that doesn't do groupthink, right? And doesn't just go along to get along. They said great leaders are usually leaders that are not liked, right? So you can't want to be liked and be the change you want to see in the world, because that may mean you like, yo, what are y'all doing? This party's wild. Y'all are out of control. If you're that person that makes that type of comment, right, you're not necessarily going to be cool or invited back, right?
Right.
But you said your piece. And often it's like the people who don't have a whole flock of people around them, or sometimes like I think about Cat Williams, right? You know, he's saying all these things. People sort of, he crazy, he's this, he's that. But he might actually be telling us all of what's really going on. So I think there's a certain level that people who tell the truth are not always listened to. They're often the conspiracy theorists, and they're the crazy people, and nobody wants to really hear those individuals that are shedding light on the things that might not be going the way we want it to go. So that's why I said we need to chill, put the pause, because we don't know if Puffy did or didn't do anything. So some people don't want their childhood icon to fall from grace. So they don't even want to hear the narrative that he could possibly have done any of this.
Can I just add this really quickly? Because I think this is the one thing that does jump out to me, is that for 20 years now, since Dipset, right, we were putting homosexuality in a negative light when we said no homo, right? And we laughed and said, oh, it's cool because it's our community, right? We're now going to do the exact same thing with Diddy. And not only are you putting it in a negative light, you're now villainizing it.
You're putting a face on it. Yeah.
That's a very, very dangerous game that we play with that.
That's great. Great point.
Like,
I would implore people to the people listening and anyone that watches this after the live ends, to your point, Chuck, I would be mindful of doing that. I think that we are confusing, fodder for someone's real life.
Yeah.
Right. And, people had issues with no homo. Sure. People have issues with saying pause. Those are two separate things versus you putting a name on it, and a name that meant something to us, because no one is saying no Weinstein, no Epstein,
no.
And I would feel the same way if people were going around saying no R. Kelly. I have my feelings about what I saw and what played out, but I'm not saying no R. Kelly. Yo, tell your kids to come over for the birthday party. No R. Kelly, no Michael Jackson.
That's wild.
Funny.
That's
you know what I mean?
It doesn't even sound right.
No, that's terrible, man.
Yeah. So so I just would implore people, please, like, before you say it and you have your laughter or you post your memes and you have your hashtags, I think 50, he has a ton of followers. Clearly, there are a lot of people who I'm friends with that follow him and they reshare his shit and all this. I just, I will say, because there was a small thing that I was involved in, and so I got to see a very interesting situation of things being reported and things being written that were far from the truth. And so when people don't have that vantage point and you are on the other side of people saying what you did, it's a whole different thing, right? And you could spend all your time going and trying to fact check everything, or you just leave the shit be. Because at the end of the day, everyone has short attention spans, and there'll be another scandal next week that everyone will move on to. But when you see shit in print and you see people sharing things, it's like, damn, like, that's actually far from. I mean, there's a thing, and this is the last thing I'll say, because I want everyone to give their final.
There's the seventh last thing you said.
Shut up. There's a thing, and shout out to Millie's, right? There's a thing online with Millie's before they made it, right? Or before they were a star, or something like that. It's on YouTube. And it's this dude reporting all this stuff about Millie's beginnings and all this stuff. And they're like, and he was trying to find his way until he came into contact with, OG rapper from Boston, Daniel Laurent. And he went on his radio show, Masterpiece Radio, and this, that, and the third. And then all of a sudden, and I'm like, that's not quite how that happened. That's actually, and it got a ton of views and everyone's watching it and liking it. And I'm like, yo, that's not true, yo. And that's not a bad thing, that story, but I'm just saying that that's online for people to see, and that's absolutely not the truth. So I just implore people to just be mindful and have some humanity. when you are talking about people, whether celebrities or your neighbors, please. And that's my final thing. So everyone else can.
I mean, I think that sounds good, and in a perfect world, it would be great, right? But the reality is that most people don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about me. They don't give a fuck about we. They don't even give a fuck about themselves. And that is the reality. And any little thing, any type of drama is just enough, unfortunately, to get them by, or to just give them a little, whatever it is that it does for them, to keep them going, because they have nothing else, unfortunately.
Yeah, they're living off the downfall of other people, you know what I mean? And just how to, again, it only happens in our community, right? The guy files a trademark to get No Diddy, like to get that trademark. Like that's, yeah, a guy in Philly, black guy, I think it was a rapper dude that filed to get that trademark. Like that's, but again, only in our community does that type of stuff happen. Nowhere else in any other community does it happen. I'm
sorry. I think it doesn't. I think it happens in other communities. I think it's just. I think it's. I think we just
highlight it more in our community.
It's more in our faces in our own community.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
I think it's handled differently.
Yeah.
Sure.
He's setting himself up for a defamation suit for one. I guarantee you, his lawyers are cooking something up. Like if he trademarked that was just dumb. Just make it street slang and leave it at that. Not that it's okay to do that, but like you trademarked that man's name and made it something negative. It's defamation.
They're coming for you. And this goes back to just like, what's the purpose of that, right? And granted, if he got enough money, he could always say, well, I wasn't talking about Diddy. I didn't know that that's what it was about. He could try to fight it. But it's like, what's the purpose? Like everything that's happening right now, if everything that's going on in the world right now, is this really the most major news?
No.
Like with everything that's going on in your own personal life or whatever's happening in your own world, you reaching your own goals, success. Is this really the most important thing in the world? This whole situation has stayed in the news for weeks now.
But see, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think that right there is the root why people like it. Like, damn, my life's fucked up, but at least I'm not going through that. That's where a lot of people get off on this type of stuff.
And I think just to feed all into that, the self-hate, life not being where you want it to be, people vicariously living through these entertainers' lives, the comparison theory that people have that they think this stuff is real. And to a certain extent it is. I hate when we say, well, social media is not real. No, it's a piece of a person's life. It's not that it's fake. It's just not everything.
What's the highlight reel?
It's not everything. And I think if you're using this one smidget to make a decision on how somebody's life is and what they're going through, you just don't have a clue. Like at the end of the day, I'm sitting in my kitchen, right? There's a sink over there. There's the wash machine and dry. There's all this other stuff you can't see beyond this one little corner that I'm showing you on my screen. And I think sometimes we're living in tunnel vision and we're not looking at the big picture. And the big picture is there's so many layers to this. There's so many blind spots to this. There's so many things that they're not telling us about this. Don't make your opinions off these little sound bites that are people's opinions, because everybody has an opinion and we all have a right to have one. But the question is what's your opinion? And why is your opinion why do you have that opinion? What's feeding your values and your morals and your moral compass? Why do you think the way you think? If you can't answer that, I respectfully tell you to go figure that out first before you keep spreading something else on the app. Right. You don't even know why you think what you think, Take a moment to figure that out. Like, are you just saying that because CNN said it? Or do you really believe it? From a 0 to 100%, how much do you believe that this man needed a whole freaking arsenal of people to come to look through his house? And he's just pacing with no gun, no nothing, and they still haven't arrested him. Doesn't that make you at least pause and want to question it just a little bit?
Definitely.
And just for Chuck, did you give your final
No, I didn't, and I'll keep it short and sweet. I think we've given 2, if not 3, really high points that we'd like the community to consider as you're thinking about, as you're talking about, as your media involves around Puff, right? I think there's another thing here where people are catching strays unnecessarily. His friends are not necessarily complicit in these actions, right? Until we know what's going on. So stop mentioning J-Lo. I've seen things about J-Lo. Stop mentioning Big. You don't know what Big was doing. Stop mentioning Prince Harry. Are y'all kidding me? Like, stop. Meek, Chris, leave them people alone, man.
Pierre.
Yeah, like leave them alone, man. Like, if you want to talk about Puff and the things that's happening in Puff's situation, that's cool. I would ask that you keep it respectful. But then secondarily, just leave friendships, leave other relationships outside of that, because it's unnecessary.
And people, and the reality is people can have multiple, like you feel like you know someone, they're showing you the side of them that they want to show you. So both things can be true. So even people saying like, oh, I've been around them all the time, I ain't never seen that. It wasn't for you to see. And we've seen that play out also. Right. So anyway, so I think I think this discussion was helpful. It was with love. I think there's a ton of commentary about this situation that I don't even bother watching, right? I watched Joe's take because it was a different thing, and I like that podcast. But there are people who are going on full-on campaigns just smearing and adding into the fodder. And it was important for all of us having this discussion to not do that and to not add to the fodder, but to have a conversation as a community and what this looks like. And all of us being of the community, having that for someone that is of the community, right? So that alone is just different. Right. And I believe that we're not in the 60%. So even that alone makes it a different conversation. So in closing, conversation with Coach La, Sparring Minds, Wedlocked and Loaded. Thank y'all for joining us. Absolutely going to be clipping this up crazy and spreading it around like that free love that's going to happen on Friday night at Chuck's house.
Oh yeah.
Facts.
So we just want to inspire people to think critically and have their own mind, right? And one of the things I love about Sparring Minds is that it's just to get you to think, man. Think for yourself. Get
and
more
ask questions.
Right.
Ask questions and don't be afraid to ask questions. And everyone, just please be kind, be safe. It's a lot of evilness in the world. When you walk outside your door, every day we're hearing something. People are not making it. Fucking bridge collapse, which is crazy. And we all have to drive over bridges somewhere in our lives. So that's just not a nice feeling to have now. Just be kind, be kind, be kind, be kind. And that's all I'll say.
Listen, I'm looking when I do my what do you call it? Map quest. I'm like, avoid all bridges.
Word.
Yeah. Shout out to the
used to be highways. Now it's like highways and bridges.
Exactly. So we will see y'all again, man. But be kind, love on each other, man, and just
be careful with that kind.
Yeah, be careful with that. Be careful with loving on each other.
Throw that on here.
Yeah.
All right, just because this is the thing, I'm just gonna end with this. Take that.
No.
All right.
I'm glad I'm off camera now.
All right, man. Love. Have a good night, y'all.
Good night.
All right, sure. Peace. Peace.
Wedlocked and loaded.
Wedlocked and loaded.